Okay, we are in Born in the Year of Courage. Chapter 3 is called Learning to Survive. Manjiro watched Fudenojo, who was growing a chin beard, make another mark on a piece of driftwood. They had been on the island for 4 days now, and they'd still not found shelter. Shaking from the cold, Manjiro knew he would never again take fire for granted. Toramon gathered reeds, wove them together, and pounded them to make them thin as paper. He then laid them on a stone and struck them again and again with another stone. Sometimes sparks would fly, but he could not make fire. Manjiro told himself to think about the good things that had happened. Boards from the wrecked boat had washed ashore along with 2 buckets and a piece of canvas. They had torn off a strip of the canvas to make a signal flag, and Toramon had placed the buckets, and there you got that on there as well. And Toramon had placed the buckets at the bottom of a slanting rock to catch the runoff when it rained. "We will not drink from the buckets unless we have to," Fudenojo had said. "They are our wells." He dubbed one of the buckets Ido, well of spring water, and the other Izumi, well of life. "We have much to be grateful for," Manjiro whispered to himself. The next morning, relishing the feel of the sun-warmed rock on the bottoms of his bare feet, he went with Goemon to explore part of the island they had not carefully covered before. From the morning they had found the island, the rocks had intrigued him. They were of various shapes and sizes, and the formations were especially interesting. Some were as graceful as an artist's drawing. Others were jumbled stacks. Violent storms, Manjiro thought, had probably caused some of the big rocks near the tops of the rock hills to fall to a lower ledge and break into pieces. Over time, wind and rain had smoothed and rounded the smaller stones. Then another storm had sent them sliding down like a waterfall. There, for instance, stood a mound of small rocks in front of big slabs. The heap of small rocks was deeper and wider at the bottom than at the top. Manjiro kept looking at the mound. It was different from any other formation he had seen on the island. He picked up one of the rocks from near the top of the pile. The one behind it fell inward. He stared at Goemon. Goemon looked back at him with wide eyes. They grabbed rocks, threw them aside, and peered into the blackness. "A cave," Manjiro whispered. He and Goemon hugged each other and danced a circle, chanting, then shouting as they ran back to the others, a cave, we have found a cave." The cave was large enough for all of them, with room to spare. It was clammy inside, and their own breath made it damper still, but it would shelter them from storms and from the cold night wind. "There is no sign that the other poor castaways ever slept here," Fudenojo said. "If it hadn't been for Manjiro, we might never have found it," Goemon said. "You know how fascinated he is with rocks." Manjiro gave a small smile. It was all very puzzling. When he had pondered how he could make the rice polishing faster, it had led to getting in trouble. But as Goemon had just said, if he had not kept wondering about the rocks, they might never have found the cave. "The wood from our boat will serve as beds," Fudenojo said, "and a piece of the canvas will be our door." Finding the cave was a good sign that their luck was changing, Manjiro thought. Remember, in this culture, they really believe in a lot of luck. He was full of hope when he took his turn the next day and went to the lookout point where they had placed their signal flag. As he sat down, he was aware of the nearby graves. There were 3 mounds of stones now. Fudenojo and Toramon had covered the skeleton. Those 3 also watched, but a ship never came for them. A thought so strong it was like spoken words came into Manjiro's mind. He rubbed his fingers across his forehead to erase the thought. Those others had probably been injured or sick when they arrived here. He's trying to make himself feel better, right, as to why, what had happened. Through the following weeks, he said many times, "This is a promising day. This is a day a ship will pass our way." Okay, so that's foreshadowing that we know he's going to be there for some weeks. One day, Goemon came running to say that there was a ship. When the others went to the lookout spot, they saw nothing. After a silent morning meal of raw albatross eggs, Manjiro walked to the shore and looked out at the waves. They were dark blue at the bottom, white at the crest, and their ceaseless slapping against the rocks could become hypnotizing. One could understand how Goemon thought he saw a ship. Thinking about Goemon running toward them, his arms pumping, his hair flying, while he shouted, a ship, made laughter bubble up in Manjiro. He went back to the others, put his hands over his eyes, and looking into space, shouted, a ship is coming. Even Goemon laughed. As the day wore on, Manjiro, Toramon, and Josuke repeated the performance until Fudenojo moved his hand in a gesture that indicated, enough, no more teasing. Manjiro faced Goemon and lowered his eyes long enough to indicate apology, but not so long that Goemon would feel compelled to reply by word or sign that the teasing hadn't bothered him. That would be an untruth, and Manjiro would be responsible for the untruth. They had learned that the albatross tasted better if they pounded it with a rock and let it dry on warm stone. They found other food too. Waiting around the island, they gathered shellfish. For a vegetable in their diet, they ate seaweed that washed up on the rocks at the waterline. But the shellfish and seaweed increased thirst. Rains had been scanty. The hollows held only a little water now. Each day they removed their clothing and bathed in the sea. On occasion they washed their clothes. Manjiro found a small, rough-edged stone and rubbed it against his fingernails and toenails to keep them from growing so long. He had lost his hair tie when he swam from the boat to the island, and he did not want to tear off a piece of his obi to make a tie, as Tormod had done. So he plaited green reeds to hold his hair in place. Thinking of how his sisters would tease him about being vain, even on a deserted rock island, he smiled. In the next instant, tears ran down his cheek, and his inside ached with homesickness. By the end of the second month, the albatross no longer a lid on their shoulders or even came close. The birds perched at the top of the high, steep rock formations. They know they're safe there, Jusuki said with a thin smile. They only think they're safe, Manjiro said. Have you not seen me practicing? I seen you throwing stones, Jusuki said. You'll never be able to hit one, Gomen said. Manjiro continued to practice, and a day came when he decided he was ready. He scarcely believed in himself when he threw the stone at an albatross, and it fell from its high perch and hit the rock below with a thud. With more practice, he became such an expert that the others teased him when he missed. The third month passed. The albatross chicks learned to fly, and the colony left. Surely they will come back, Gomen said. When their migration brings them back to nest, Fudonojo said. That will be many months from now. By that time, they will not need to fear us, Jusuki said. We will be dead. Since the day we were caught in the storm, we have had many signs that we are cared for, Manjiro said. We will not die. We are going to be rescued. As the days grew warmer and the winter rain stopped, his hope waned. They had to drink from the buckets now, and even though Fudonojo had cut their ration to one small shellful a day, the water level went down quickly. The thirst was always there, their mouths so dry they could not even produce saliva to ease the body's plea for water. Manjiro smiled ruefully when he remembered that he had once written a poem about the beauty of the stars. Now, if a small cloud appeared at night when he was outside the cave, he found himself saying, Cover them, clouds, cover the stars. Jusuki spent more and more time in the cave. Fireflies, he whispered late one afternoon when he was in the cave and the others sat outside it. Come, Fudonojo said. Come outside, my brother. After more coaxing, Jusuki came out of the cave. He looked around and smiled blissfully. The cherry trees are in bloom, he said. Are they not beautiful? After a few moments, he crawled back into the cave. The others went separate ways, each to dwell with the sorrow about Jusuki in his own way. He's not mentally doing well. Manjiro sat down on a rock and wept. When the crying was done, his thoughts turned to home, to the fireflies and cherry blossoms Jusuki saw in his delirium, and to his family. He pictured his mother arranging flowers to place on the tokonoma, which is the home's place of beauty, and then moving to the family altar, the butsuden, to pray. Manjiro whispered, I am not dead, Okasan. Don't worry. So he's kind of speaking to his mother. In his mind's eye, his little sister was also very sad. It must have hurt his older brother that from the time she had been able to walk, it had been Manjiro she followed around. Manjiro she looked to when her kite would not fly. By tradition, the oldest son in a family should have been registered as the head of household. But even before Manjiro was born, their mother said she had known her first son would always need someone to care for him. By now, his mother had probably adopted a boy to take his place as head of household. He suddenly sat bolt upright. The rock he was sitting on had trembled. Perhaps he had only imagined it. Seconds later, it was as if something hit the island, jolted it. His insides slid in a sickening lurch. He had experienced this before, an earthquake. The sea churned, rocks rolled and crashed against each other. Would the island sink? The earthquake stopped. Fudonojo was calling. The cave is sealed, Fudonojo shouted. Jusuki is trapped. Frantically, they wrestled loose rocks away from the entrance. Gomen sobbed aloud. When they removed enough of the stones to make a partial opening, Jusuki said, This is a very sturdy cave. Gritty dust and pebbles had fallen on him, but he had not even suffered a bruise. Chapter 4 is a short one, and it's called A Desperate Situation. Jusuki's sudden clearness of mind did not last, and he often did not know where he was. Sometimes he crawled out of the cave, looked around, and asked, Where is everybody? Have all abandoned us? As they began the 5th month on the island, Fudonojo climbed the rocks on the high end of the island. Since it was now summer, he hoped to find plants growing from wind-blown seed. Standing with Gomen, Manjiro watched Fudonojo move higher and higher. Fudonojo had slipped. He was falling. Well above where Manjiro and Gomen stood, Fudonojo hit a ledge with a thud. For a stunned second, Manjiro couldn't move. Then he began to climb, scrambling toward the ledge. Gomen was right behind him, sobbing as he climbed. When they reached the ledge, Fudonojo lay still and silent, his eyes closed. He's dead, Gomen wailed. My brother is dead. Be quiet, Gomen, Manjiro said more sharply than he had meant to. Fudonojo was breathing, his chest rising and falling. If he was hurt badly enough that he could make the choice between life and death, Gomen's wailing of the word dead might lead him through that door. Fudonojo, Manjiro said in a calm voice. You fell. Gomen and Manjiro are here. Open your eyes, please. Fudonojo groaned. His eyes fluttered open and then closed again. Loose rock, he mumbled. Manjiro checked Fudonojo's arms and legs. Gashes were bleeding and bruised welts were rising and turning purple. Can you move your limbs? Tears still ran down Gomen's face, but he made no sound. No bones are broken, Fudonojo said. I am just tired, so tired. After the fall, Fudonojo spent more and more time in the cave with Jusuki. When he came outside, he gazed into space. His beard was so long now and his eyes so sunken that he made Manjiro think of the wise old man in Nakanohama. That's their home. With both his older brothers sick, Goemon sank into despair and wandered listlessly. Manjiro found food for all of them and told them the things he had discovered. Placing the seaweed on a rock and scraping it with your hand removes more of the salt than shaking does, he said. He tried and tried but could not catch fish with his bare hands. Turtle! Turtles didn't react as quickly as fish did. He squatted and waited without moving until a turtle waded up from the water's edge to sun itself. Then he pounced quickly before it could return to the water and safety. With sharp stones, he and Toramon removed the shell and gutted the turtle, then cut it up and gave each of the others a piece. After they managed to tear off and chew and swallow a bite, Manjiro said, "Raw turtle is as tough as raw albatross, but I think it is tastier." No one responded. "Do you agree, Fudonojo? The turtle is tastier?" Fudonojo looked at him as if he did not comprehend the question and said nothing. When the meal, which they ate at mid-afternoon, was finished, Manjiro walked away from the others and stood alone. The sea stroked the rocks gently today. The murmur was like music, or a poem. A poem Manjiro had heard recited when he went to school at the Buddhist temple before his father's death came up from his mind's depths. The wind-blown smoke of Mount Fuji disappearing far beyond. Who knows the destiny of my thought wandering away with it? Here one's thought wandered away on the ocean waves. The thought was strong and clear. I am the leader now. It did not please him, but neither did it frighten him. And that is the end of chapters 3 and 4 from Born in the Year of Courage.